That cake is a lie.
Before I begin my analysis of the stunning Apollo 10 cover-up, the music behind the moon, I want to say something about its creator, LunaCognita. He has two great talents, one being that he makes some stunningly crafted videos with professional quality, which results in an enjoyable viewing experience. His other talent is he really knows how to sell bullshit. Whether he is knowingly doing this or not, Luna's videos are at first glance very convincing, until you step back from the big picture and see it for what it really is. So let's take off and listen to the music behind the moon. Yeah, that was pretty hammy, wasn't it? LunaCognita stipulates that the crew of Apollo 10 heard extraterrestrial music from behind the moon, and when they radioed Houston their findings, NASA censored the broadcast from the public. Seems interesting at first, but after some research, you'll find some glaringly obvious holes in this theory. Apollo 10 was a dress rehearsal for the eventual moon landing of Apollo 11. It was piloted by Commander Tom Stafford, Command Module Pilot John Young, and Lunar Module Pilot Gene Cernan. During their flight, they orbited around the moon, and while on the far side, communications were blocked in what is called loss of signal. According to the DSEA, a device that acts much like a black box, the astronauts heard strange sounds over their headsets during loss of signal. In the transcripts highlighted by LunaCognita, you can see them talk about hearing whistling and outer spacey or eerie music. However, what they're hearing is disappointingly mundane. It is merely interference over the VHF frequency between the command and lunar modules. John Young even mentions this on the transcripts. Yes, VHF-A. It's a really simple effect to replicate. If you take two walkie-talkies, open their mics, and hold them at certain distances, it produces a theremin-like effect. Sound outer spacey enough? It is also no coincidence that the strange music was only heard during loss of signal. When these mics were isolated behind the moon, interference was amplified. Astronaut Michael Collins actually mentioned this VHF interference in his autobiography, Carrying the Fire. On page 412 and 413, he quotes from his Rendezvous book, "There is a strange noise in my headset now, an eerie woo-woo sound. Had I not been warned about it, it would have scared the hell out of me. Stafford's Apollo 10 crew had first heard it during their practice rendezvous around the moon. Alone on the backside, they were more than a little surprised to hear a noise that John Young in the command module and Tom Stafford in the LEM each denied making." Illogically, Luna seems to hint that they're hearing music from outside the ship, citing this transcript line, and see who was outside. Unfortunately, due to the lack of audio publication and an incomplete microphone recording, we can never fully comprehend what John Young meant. However, we do know that because space is a vacuum, sound cannot travel. So even if someone outside the spacecraft was blasting Wolf Mother with a 25-foot tweeter and bass, the astronauts wouldn't hear a damn thing. John Young is clearly not talking about a source of sound coming from outside the craft, and if he was, it must have been a joke. Personally, I love this bit here, how it is very interesting that none of the crew mentions the music to Mission Control. Perhaps because they knew it was just radio interference and there was no need to waste time. Again, from the Michael Collins quote, we see that the astronauts actually did mention it, just not during the clip that Luna presents. Besides, at that moment, the astronauts were more excited about something else.
Hello, Apollo 10, Houston, over.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 10, you can tell the world that we have arrived.
Roger, 10, it's good to hear from you.
You wouldn't believe this thing.
Sorry, Luna, I believe you heard the word Frank there?
You wouldn't believe this thing.
Oh, you did. No, wait a minute, no, it's not Frank Borman. Wait, a covert Capcom? That's a bold statement to assert with no evidence. Sorry, but...
You're doing it wrong.
Tom Stafford is actually saying, "Oh, you wouldn't believe this thing." With text, it helps. Check it out.
You wouldn't believe this thing. You wouldn't believe this thing.
The transcripts even have "thing" written down. But isn't this part of the cover-up, though? Hardly. What Luna failed to connect was the subsequent discussion of the burn the astronauts just made. He even has part of this conversation in his video.
The guidance was absolutely fantastic, and we'll give you the burns right now.
Stafford was merely impressed by the accuracy of the guidance system and the power of the rocket engines on board. It's in the transcripts. Check it out.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 10, you can tell the world that we have arrived.
Roger, 10, it's good to hear from you.
You wouldn't believe this thing.
What's John Young?
The guidance was absolutely...
And by the way, Luna, that is not a splice in the audio. What you're hearing is the public affairs officer providing commentary to the transmissions. The splice you're hearing is actually the microphone's Vox setting. Vox, as opposed to push to talk, begins receiving audio as soon as the mic hears a voice. Typically, a bit is cut off at the beginning while the sensor activates. If anything, one can criticize the PAO for misidentifying the person speaking as John Young when it is really Tom Stafford speaking. Finally, I just want to touch upon the final point of Luna's video where he claims that Gene Cernan was speaking out of character and hearing not whistling, but choir music and chanting. Luna apparently learned this from a reliable source.
or should I say a drunk raving source.
Considering he's been lying and using scare tactics to convince his audience, can we really trust this source is reliable, or that the source even exists? Besides, Cernan's change in tone was most likely a stress reaction from being on the far side of the moon without communication with home. I find that I and many other people use humor as a stress reliever whenever anxious. I personally love this final quote, but frankly, Luna, I find enough wonder in the journey of Apollo 10 itself. Apollo 10 came 8.4 nautical miles from the surface of the moon. Had their craft been equipped to land, and their mission more than just a dress rehearsal, it's possible that we may never have heard of Neil Armstrong, and instead teach children about the landing of Tom Stafford. Thanks for watching. That cake is a lie.
That cake is a lie.